He was always quiet in class, sitting at the back with his notebook and pencil. He liked to keep to himself, drawing small doodles when he wasn't paying attention. He wasn't shy exactly, but he preferred to observe rather than join the chatter around him. The other students noticed, but they didn't pay much attention. Some thought he was strange, some thought he was smart, and some just didn't think about him at all. He liked it that way. It allowed him to think about music, the one thing that made him feel alive. He loved the piano more than anything. At home, he would sit for hours, fingers dancing across the keys as if they had a life of their own. He didn't care if he made mistakes or played slowly. Every note mattered to him, every chord had meaning. The piano was his friend, his escape, the place where he could be himself without judgment. But at school, music wasn't always welcomed the same way. The music teacher had a reputation. He was strict, with sharp eyes that seemed to catch even the smallest slip. He spoke loudly and expected perfect behavior and performance from his students. Mistakes weren't tolerated, and laughter at someone else's expense was normal in his classroom. The boy had seen it happen many times. Students who stumbled over a simple scale were called out, teased, and left red-faced in front of everyone. He hated seeing it, but he also feared it. He wanted to avoid that kind of attention at all costs. One morning, the teacher announced a new assignment. Every student would play a short piece on the piano during the next class. The boy's stomach tightened. He had been practicing a simple song at home, something he could play easily, but the thought of performing in front of the teacher made his hands sweat. The other students murmured and laughed, some relieved, some nervous, but no one looked as serious as he did. He kept his head down, trying not to think about it, hoping the teacher would somehow overlook him. When the day came, the classroom buzzed with anticipation. Students took turns playing, some hitting the right notes, some stumbling. The teacher's face was a mask of impatience, and every mistake was met with a sharp comment. When it was his turn, he felt every eye in the room on him. His fingers hovered over the keys, shaking slightly. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. The teacher leaned back in his chair, watching, already ready to pounce on any mistake. The boy started to play. At first, his hands felt heavy, the notes awkward, but as he continued, he found his rhythm. The music flowed from him naturally, and for a moment the classroom seemed to disappear. He was no longer worried about the teacher or the eyes watching him. He was just him, and the piano was an extension of his thoughts. But just as he hit a difficult part, the teacher interrupted. "Stop! What are you doing? That's wrong. Do you even know the notes?" The boy froze. His heart sank. He had been so focused, so confident in his own space. But now, in front of everyone, the teacher's voice felt like a hammer striking him down. He tried to continue, but his fingers faltered. The music stumbled. The teacher walked closer, shaking his head, his disappointment clear for everyone to see. The boy wanted to disappear, to vanish from the room. The whispers started, some giggles, some sympathetic looks, but mostly he felt exposed. He wanted to shout, to defend himself, but the words wouldn't come. He just wanted the moment to end. Finally, the teacher waved him off, muttering something about needing more practice. He left the piano bench slowly, trying to keep his head high, but inside he felt crushed. After class, he sat alone in the music room. The piano keys were still under his fingers, waiting for him, and he could feel the pull of the music stronger than the sting of embarrassment. He pressed a key softly, then another, letting the melody wash over him. In this space, no one could judge him. He could play perfectly here in the way that felt right. He spent hours at the piano, practicing in silence, pushing himself to learn more complex pieces, to master every note. Each mistake at school became fuel for his determination. He would not let one teacher's harsh words define his love for music. The other students continued with their daily chatter, some unaware of the turmoil he faced. He noticed them, sometimes smiling at their antics, but mostly he was absorbed in his own world. Music had a way of making him feel alive, of making everything else fade away. It was more than a hobby. It was a part of who he was. Every evening, he would sit at the piano bench, exploring melodies, learning new techniques, and imagining a day when his music would speak louder than any harsh words. Days turned into weeks. Each class, the teacher found reasons to criticize him, testing his patience and resolve. He endured the sneers, the pointed comments, and the embarrassment. But each time he returned home, he played with more passion. The frustration from school became an energy that transformed into skill. He worked tirelessly, learning from mistakes, perfecting pieces, and discovering a depth to his music he had never known before. His parents noticed the change. They saw him spending long hours at the piano, sometimes late into the night, and they worried he might be overworking himself. But he reassured them with a smile, telling them music made him happy. They could see the joy it brought him, even if school made things difficult. They encouraged him quietly, always supporting his dedication. Little by little, he began to feel a shift inside himself. He realized that the teacher's words, as harsh as they were, could not take away his love for music. They could not diminish the hours of practice, the melodies he had learned by heart, or the connection he felt with the piano. He began to understand that the challenge wasn't about impressing the teacher. It was about proving to himself that he could rise above the judgment and continue to do what he loved. One afternoon, as he practiced a particularly challenging piece, he paused and listened to the music filling the room. Every note, every pause, every soft trill felt like a victory. He realized he was getting stronger not just in skill but in confidence. The fear that had gripped him in the classroom began to fade. He knew that one day he would have the chance to show everyone, not just the teacher, what he was truly capable of. And so, with each passing day, he continued to practice, to learn, and to grow. The piano became his refuge and his stage, even if only in his imagination. He held on to the belief that the right moment would come when his music would speak for itself, when no words of ridicule could overpower the sound of his talent. The boy was no longer just a quiet student at the back of the class. He was a young musician, quietly preparing for the day when the world would hear him. At home, the boy's piano became more than just an instrument. It was a secret world where he could explore without fear. Every evening, after finishing his homework, he would sit for hours, hands moving over the keys, as if he were telling a story only he could understand. The room filled with music, soft and strong, happy and sad. Each piece he played seemed to carry a piece of his heart, and in those moments, he forgot the harsh words of the teacher, the sneers of classmates, and the nervous knot in his stomach. He had discovered old music books at a small second-hand store, pieces written decades ago, full of difficult chords and moving melodies. The boy would spend days on a single piece, learning each note carefully, repeating it again and again until his fingers knew the song without thinking. Sometimes he played slowly, sometimes fast, always feeling the emotion behind the music. He imagined large audiences, imagining that one day he might play in front of people who would understand what he was trying to say. Despite his growing skill, the teacher at school continued to underestimate him. In class, the boy remained quiet, rarely volunteering, rarely drawing attention. The teacher seemed to think that he would never be able to handle something challenging, always ready to mock him for the smallest mistakes. But the boy knew something the teacher didn't. He was learning far more at home than anyone at school could see. His music was becoming sharper, deeper, more expressive, and with each practice, his confidence grew. He also started to notice the small details that made a performance remarkable. How to control his hands for soft notes, how to make loud notes dramatic without losing rhythm, how to connect melodies so they flowed smoothly. Each evening he experimented, sometimes failing, sometimes discovering something new. Every mistake became a lesson. Each success became a spark of joy. He was building a foundation, brick by brick, of talent that no criticism could break. One afternoon, while practicing a particularly complex piece, he realized he had learned it without help, without anyone guiding him. The notes flowed naturally now, and his fingers remembered every movement. The excitement made him smile, and for a moment, he could see the pride on his parents' faces, the respect of classmates, even the surprise of the teacher. He knew this was just the beginning, but it felt like a step into a larger world where his talent could shine. Outside, life continued as usual. School days brought their share of challenges, awkward moments, and the occasional cruel joke from other students who didn't understand his quiet nature. But he began to handle it differently. When someone laughed at him or whispered behind his back, he no longer felt the same sting. He reminded himself of the hours spent at the piano, the melodies he had mastered, and the feelings that only music could give him. Those moments of mockery became small waves in a sea of his growing passion and skill. He started noticing other students who shared his love for music, though they were few. One day, he heard a classmate playing a small tune on the piano during free time. Their fingers stumbled a little, but the effort and joy in their playing were clear. The boy smiled, remembering how he had started, and offered encouragement. The classmate looked surprised at first but then smiled back. It was a small connection, but it gave him a sense of community, proof that music could bring people together even in the strict environment of the school. At home, the piano became a companion in every emotion. When he felt lonely, he played soft, slow tunes that comforted him. When he felt angry, he played powerful, fast pieces that let him release energy without hurting anyone. When he felt happy, he played lively, bright songs that made him laugh and smile. Music was not just practice. It was his life. And the more he played, the more he understood that skill alone was not enough. Expression mattered. Feeling mattered. The story behind each note mattered. He also started to experiment with improvisation. He would play a simple melody, then add variations, try new rhythms, or mix different styles. Sometimes it sounded messy, but sometimes it sounded magical. Each success encouraged him to take more risks. He began to understand that the piano could be an extension of his thoughts, his imagination, and even his dreams. It was no longer just a way to perform pieces correctly. It was a way to communicate without words, to tell stories with music. Despite the progress he was making at home, the thought of performing in front of the teacher still made him nervous. The memories of criticism and embarrassment lingered. But each time he practiced, each time he discovered a new skill, the fear became smaller. He started to believe that when the right moment came, he would be ready. Not to prove the teacher wrong, not for applause, but to show himself the result of his dedication and love for music. He also began to notice the power of patience. Some pieces took weeks to master. Some chords hurt his fingers. Sometimes progress seemed slow. But with each practice session, he reminded himself that skill came from persistence, not speed. The piano taught him discipline, focus, and the value of never giving up. Each time he stumbled, he corrected himself. Each time he learned something new, he celebrated quietly, knowing that the real reward was within himself. The boy's family watched quietly, sometimes amazed at how much he had grown in such a short time. They saw the determination in his eyes, the way he approached each new piece, the way he smiled when he finally got a challenging section right. They didn't push him, didn't demand perfection. They simply supported him. Their encouragement, quiet but steady, gave him the confidence to continue exploring his talent and to imagine the day when he could share it with others. School continued to be a place of challenges. The teacher still watched him critically, and classmates still whispered and judged. But the boy was no longer the same as he had been before. He had a strength inside that no words could touch, a skill that could not be denied. His secret world of music had become a shield, a teacher, and a friend. Each note he played was a reminder that he was capable, that he could grow, and that he could face whatever came in the classroom without losing himself. One day, while practicing a new piece, he realized something important. The music he played at home was better than anything he had attempted in class. He was ready to show the world, not just the teacher, what he could do. Not yet, not to everyone, but soon. The excitement made his hands fly across the keys, the notes soaring, confident, alive. He had discovered that his talent was not just about practice. It was about belief in himself, about the courage to keep going even when others doubted him. And so the boy continued. Each day brought new pieces to learn, new challenges to overcome, and new ways to express himself. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a part of him, a companion that understood every emotion, every thought, every dream. He knew that one day, His music would be heard beyond the walls of his home, and he would finally have the chance to surprise everyone, to show the depth of his talent, and to prove that the quiet student in the back of the classroom had something extraordinary inside. The day finally arrived when the teacher announced a special piano recital for the class. Everyone had to perform a piece they had prepared. The boy's stomach tightened as he listened. His heart raced. He had spent so many hours practicing at home, hidden from everyone, and now he would have to perform in front of his classmates and the teacher. The thought made him nervous, but also excited. This was his chance to show what he had been working on, to finally let his music speak. He watched as the other students whispered and compared pieces. Some were confident, showing off little tricks they had learned. Others were clearly nervous, hands shaking over the keys. The teacher walked around, offering comments that ranged from encouraging to cutting. The boy stayed quiet, sitting at the back, his sheet music ready. He reminded himself that this was not about impressing anyone but about sharing a part of himself. When it was finally his turn, he walked to the piano slowly. His legs felt heavy, and his hands trembled slightly. The classroom was silent. All eyes were on him. He took a deep breath and sat down, his fingers hovering above the keys. The teacher's gaze was sharp, almost waiting for him to make a mistake. The boy felt a wave of fear, remembering past criticism. But he closed his eyes for a moment, letting the music he had practiced so many times at home fill his mind. He began to play. At first, the notes were soft and careful, each one measured, precise. He could hear the teacher's eyes on him, expectant and critical, but he didn't let it shake him. The music started to flow, growing stronger and more confident with each measure. The boy was no longer thinking about the classroom, the teacher, or the students. He was in his own world, his fingers telling a story that had been waiting to be shared. Some of the students leaned forward, curious. The teacher, initially frowning, raised an eyebrow as the music filled the room. The boy's hands moved quickly now, shifting effortlessly between chords and melodies. He added small flourishes he had learned during his secret practice sessions, little touches that made the music feel alive. The sound was smooth, emotional, and commanding. Everyone was surprised by the depth of his playing. Midway through the piece, a small mistake caused a fleeting pause. The teacher's lips tightened, ready to snap at him. But the boy didn't falter. He adjusted immediately, turning the stumble into part of the music, letting it blend seamlessly. The confidence in his performance grew. He felt a thrill. For the first time in the classroom, he was not afraid. He was in control, expressing everything he had learned and felt. The students began to whisper softly among themselves. Many had expected a quiet, nervous performance, and what they were hearing was completely different. The music filled the room, capturing attention, creating a sense of wonder. The boy noticed some students' eyes widen, some leaning closer, almost holding their breath. The teacher's expression changed from skepticism to shock. He had never seen this level of skill from this student before. The final section of the piece required both speed and precision, and the boy's fingers danced over the keys effortlessly. He felt exhilaration building inside him, the culmination of years of quiet practice, dedication, and love for the music. He poured emotion into each note, letting the classroom experience fade away. This was the music he had imagined, the performance he had dreamed of, the moment where all his hard work could finally shine. As the last note echoed, the room was silent for a heartbeat. Then slowly applause began. At first a few hesitant claps, then more, until the entire classroom was clapping enthusiastically. The boy's face flushed, not from embarrassment this time, but from pride. He had done it. He had faced the challenge and transformed his fear into something beautiful. The applause grew louder, and even the teacher clapped, though his expression remained a mixture of surprise and reluctant respect. The teacher finally spoke, his voice quieter than usual. That was unexpected, very impressive. The words hung in the air, carrying weight. The boy felt a sense of validation, not just from the recognition but from proving to himself that his skill and effort mattered. He had faced judgment and criticism and come out stronger. The music had spoken for him in a way words never could. His classmates approached, some offering congratulations, some asking questions about how he had learned such complex pieces. The boy smiled, feeling a sense of connection he had never felt before in the classroom. For the first time, he realized that sharing his talent could inspire others, that music could bridge gaps, break walls, and create respect and understanding. It was not just about performance. It was about expression and connection. As the day went on, the boy replayed the moment in his mind. He remembered the fear, the tension, the hesitation, and then the triumph. Every hour of practice at home, every secret session at the piano, every mistake corrected in silence, all of it had led to this moment. He understood that talent alone was not enough. Courage, patience, and persistence were just as important. He had faced the teacher's scrutiny and come out stronger. Even later, when he was alone, he returned to the piano at home. The familiar keys felt different now, full of promise and possibility. He tried a new piece, experimenting with variations, feeling freer than ever before. The fear that had once gripped him was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. He knew challenges would come again, but he had discovered a strength within himself that would always help him rise above doubt and criticism. The experience also changed his view of the teacher. While the teacher had been harsh, the boy realized that some challenges pushed him to grow, even if the teacher didn't intend it. He didn't excuse the mockery or harsh words, but he understood that he could transform negativity into motivation. The teacher had underestimated him, but the boy had used that underestimation to fuel his own journey. In the days following the recital, students talked about the performance in hushed tones. Many were surprised, some impressed, and some inspired. The boy didn't boast. He simply smiled quietly, happy that the music had been heard, that it had mattered, and that he had faced the classroom challenge without losing himself. The respect he earned was quiet, subtle, but meaningful. He felt seen in a way he hadn't before. The boy continued to practice diligently, exploring new pieces and techniques, experimenting with rhythm and expression. The recital had opened a door, showing him that he could step into the world and let his talent shine. He realized that while school and teachers could be challenging, true growth came from dedication, passion, and self-belief. He carried that lesson with him, feeling stronger, more confident, and ready for the future. And so the boy's journey continued. He had faced his fears, risen to the challenge, and discovered that his piano skills were not just hidden talent. They were a voice, a way to express himself, a bridge to connect with others. The classroom had been a trial, but it had revealed his potential and given him the courage to keep going. Each day, he returned to the piano with renewed energy, ready to explore, create, and share his music, knowing that he had overcome a significant hurdle and that greater challenges and triumphs awaited him. The day of the school-wide performance had arrived. The boy's heart beat rapidly as he walked toward the grand piano set up in the hall. The room was filled with students, teachers, and a few parents who had come to watch. The boy could feel the weight of everyone's gaze, the murmur of anticipation in the air, and the heavy presence of the teacher who had once embarrassed him. But he carried with him the countless hours of practice, the melodies he had memorized, and the courage that had been growing inside him for months. When his turn came, he approached the piano slowly. His hands trembled slightly, but he took a deep breath, steadying himself. Sitting down, he let his fingers hover over the keys, feeling the smooth surface beneath them, familiar and comforting. For a brief moment, he closed his eyes, letting the music he had created in private fill his mind. This was the moment he had been preparing for, and he was determined to give it everything. He began with a soft introduction, gentle notes that seemed to float in the air. The audience leaned in slightly, captivated by the delicate beginning. The boy focused on each note, letting the music guide him rather than his fear. As he continued, the melody became more complex, faster, and filled with emotion. The hall seemed to fade away. It was just him and the piano, telling a story through sound. The teacher's eyes widened in disbelief. He had expected a nervous, average performance, but the boy's playing was confident, expressive, and flawless. Every chord was precise, every note filled with feeling. The boy's fingers moved over the keys with speed and grace, showing a skill that no one in the room had anticipated. The audience was silent, caught in the spell of the music, unable to believe what they were hearing. Midway through the piece, the boy executed a challenging section that required incredible speed and accuracy. His hands moved almost like they had a life of their own, dancing across the keyboard in perfect harmony. Even the teacher, known for his sharp criticisms, could not hide his astonishment. He leaned forward, eyes fixed on the boy's hands, clearly realizing for the first time that he had underestimated this student completely. The boy's performance was more than technical skill. He played with emotion, telling a story without words. The audience could feel the passion in every note, the joy, the sadness, the triumph. Some students whispered to each other, amazed that someone they had ignored or underestimated could possess such talent. Parents shifted in their seats, holding their breath, unable to look away. The hall was filled with the boy's music, and it carried a power that was impossible to ignore. As he reached the climax of the piece, the boy's confidence soared. Every note rang clear and strong, resonating through the hall. He had practiced this moment countless times, and now it was perfect. The final notes echoed, soft and lingering, leaving a silence that felt like a pause in time. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, slowly, the room erupted into applause. Hands clapped, feet stomped, and cheers filled the space. The boy felt a rush of pride and relief, a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. He had done it. He had conquered his fear and shown the world his true talent. The teacher approached, still trying to process what had just happened. I didn't expect that, he said, his voice quiet, almost shaking. The boy smiled politely, accepting the acknowledgement but not needing any further praise. He had played for himself, for his passion, and for the joy of music, and that was enough. The applause continued, and some students even approached him afterward, asking questions and complimenting his skill. He answered with quiet humility, pleased that his music had inspired others. Later, as the boy walked home, he reflected on the performance. The fear he had felt earlier seemed distant now. The music had carried him through, giving him strength when he needed it most. He realized that the experience had changed him. He was no longer just a quiet student hiding his talent. He had proven that dedication, practice, and belief in oneself could overcome even the harshest criticism. At home, he returned to the piano, not to practice for the next performance, but simply to enjoy the music. He tried new pieces, explored different styles, and experimented with melodies he had never attempted before. The hall of the school had shown him what was possible, but the piano at home reminded him why he played, to feel, to express, and to create. Every note carried the memory of that performance and the understanding that his music could move people in ways words never could. Over the following days, the boy noticed changes in his school life. The teacher, though still strict, treated him with more respect, no longer doubting his abilities. Classmates who had once whispered or laughed now approached him with curiosity and admiration. Some asked for lessons, tips, or even just to hear him play again. The boy accepted their interest with patience, happy to share what he loved without arrogance. He understood that talent could inspire, and that connection through music was more powerful than criticism. Even outside the classroom, the boy's confidence began to grow. He started participating more, raising his hand, and joining discussions, no longer shrinking away from attention. The fear that had once controlled him had been replaced by a quiet strength, a belief in his own abilities. He knew there would still be challenges, moments of doubt, and perhaps even criticism, but he had learned that true strength came from perseverance, passion, and self-belief. His family noticed the difference as well. They saw him walking with his head held high, speaking with confidence, and approaching his music with renewed energy. They were proud, not just of his skill, but of his courage and determination. They continued to support him quietly, giving him space to grow and encouraging him to explore new opportunities. The boy continued to practice diligently, not for recognition, but for the love of music. Each evening, he would sit at the piano, exploring new pieces, improvising melodies, and feeling the joy that came from creating. The experience of performing had shown him what was possible, but the daily practice reminded him why he played. Music had become more than a talent. It was a part of him, a way to express his deepest thoughts and emotions. As weeks passed, the memory of the school performance stayed with him, a reminder of his growth and potential. He knew that greater challenges awaited, that the world beyond the school would have its own tests and trials. But he felt ready. He had discovered that skill, passion, and courage could combine to overcome fear and doubt. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a bridge between his inner world and the world around him, a way to connect, inspire, and be seen. And so, the boy continued his journey, carrying the lessons of that performance into every day. He practiced, he learned, and he explored, always seeking to grow and express himself. He had faced fear, judgment, and doubt, and had emerged stronger, more confident, and more connected to his music than ever before. The applause, the astonished faces, and the respect he had earned were all reminders that his talent was real, powerful, and capable of touching the hearts of others. He was ready for whatever came next, knowing that music would always be his guide and his strength. After the school performance, the boy's life began to change in ways he hadn't expected. The respect from his classmates was evident in their smiles, nods, and quiet compliments. Students who had once ignored or laughed at him now approached him with curiosity, asking questions about the music he played and the hours he had spent practicing. The boy accepted their interest with quiet humility, happy that his passion could inspire others. The teacher, once strict and skeptical, had a new expression when he watched the boy play. It was a mixture of surprise, pride, and acknowledgement. Though he rarely gave open praise, the boy could sense that the teacher's attitude had shifted. The constant criticism had transformed into careful guidance, with encouragement in the moments that counted. The boy understood that even the toughest teachers could teach lessons indirectly, pushing him to work harder and discover his own strength. Word about his piano skills spread beyond the classroom. A few parents who had attended the performance spoke to the principal, expressing amazement at the boy's talent. The school decided to allow him to play in the next assembly, giving him a platform to showcase his music to a wider audience. The boy felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. He had learned that every new challenge could feel daunting, but it also brought the chance to grow and prove himself again. He prepared for the assembly with care, selecting a piece that combined technical skill with emotion. Every day after school, he practiced, refining each note, adjusting the rhythm, and imagining the audience's reactions. The music was no longer just a hobby. It had become a way to communicate, to connect, and to leave an impact. Each hour of practice reminded him that talent alone was not enough. It required patience, effort, and the courage to share it with others. When the assembly day arrived, the boy walked onto the stage with calm determination. The hall was filled with students, teachers, and parents, all eager to hear him play. He sat at the piano, feeling the smooth keys under his fingers and the weight of expectation in the room. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a moment, and let the music take over. As he played, the notes carried across the hall, telling a story of passion, dedication, and perseverance. The audience listened in silence, captivated by the skill and emotion in every chord. When the last note echoed, the hall erupted into applause. Students cheered, teachers clapped, and parents smiled with admiration. The boy's face flushed, not with embarrassment but with pride and joy. He had transformed fear into art, doubt into expression. The music had spoken louder than any words ever could, and the applause was not just for his skill, but for the courage and heart behind it. The experience changed the boy's confidence. He began to participate more actively in class, not only in music but in other subjects as well. He raised his hand, shared ideas, and engaged in discussions with a newfound assurance. The fear of judgment that had once held him back was replaced by self-belief. He realized that true strength came from within, from the dedication to follow one's passion despite obstacles and criticism. At home, the piano became a space of endless exploration. The boy continued to practice, learning new pieces, experimenting with improvisation, and discovering ways to express himself that went beyond technique. He played for joy, for growth, and for the connection that music created with others. Every note was a reflection of his journey, every melody a story of determination, resilience, and love for the art. His family noticed the changes as well. They saw the boy walking with confidence, speaking with clarity, and approaching challenges with determination. They felt pride not just in his talent, but in the strength of character he had developed. They encouraged him quietly, understanding that their support allowed him to explore his abilities freely and grow into the person he was becoming. The boy also began to inspire other students. Some who had once doubted themselves started practicing with more focus, motivated by his example. He answered questions, offered guidance, and shared insights about learning music, showing that talent was accessible with effort and dedication. The classroom slowly transformed into a more supportive environment, where students encouraged each other instead of competing or mocking. The boy's journey had a ripple effect, demonstrating that perseverance and passion could influence more than just oneself. The teacher, while maintaining his usual strict demeanor, became a mentor in subtle ways. He offered challenges that pushed the boy further, introduced complex pieces, and guided him with careful attention. The boy learned to appreciate this balance of discipline and support. He understood that growth often required facing difficulties, and that even critical feedback could be valuable when approached with determination and humility. Outside of school, the boy's love for music continued to flourish. He began imagining future performances, exploring different genres, and composing his own pieces. Music had become a way to express thoughts and emotions that words could not capture. Each performance, each practice session, was a journey into self-discovery, helping him understand not only his talent, but also his capacity for patience, focus, and emotional expression. The boy also learned to balance his music with other aspects of life. He understood the importance of rest, of spending time with family, and of pursuing other interests alongside his passion. This balance allowed him to maintain his joy for music without feeling overwhelmed or pressured. It reinforced the idea that talent grows best when nurtured in a supportive and well-rounded environment. Months passed, and the boy's reputation as a skilled pianist grew. He performed at school events, local community gatherings, and even small competitions. Each opportunity was met with the same dedication, focus, and love for music that had carried him through the challenges of the classroom. He never played to impress others alone. He played to share a piece of himself, to communicate through melodies, and to bring joy to those who listened. The boy reflected often on his journey. He remembered the fear, the embarrassment, and the doubt that had once consumed him. He remembered the harsh words of the teacher, the sneers of classmates, and the silent moments of frustration. And he remembered how he had transformed those experiences into strength, practice, and artistry. Each step, each challenge, had shaped him into a more confident, resilient, and expressive individual. In the end, the boy's triumph was more than just musical skill. It was a lesson in perseverance, courage, and self-belief. He had faced humiliation and criticism, yet he had remained true to his passion and honed his abilities in silence and determination. The music he played had become a voice for his dreams, a testament to the power of dedication, and an inspiration to those who witnessed it. He knew that the road ahead would have its challenges, new performances, and higher expectations. But he was ready. He had learned that fear could be transformed into courage, that criticism could be transformed into motivation, and that true talent flourished through practice, patience, and love. With each note he played, he carried the lessons of his journey, and with each melody, he shared a piece of his heart with the world. The boy continued to grow, not only as a pianist but as a person. Music remained his companion, guide, and voice. Every day, he returned to the piano with excitement and dedication, exploring new pieces, mastering old ones, and creating melodies that reflected his inner world. The applause, the respect, and the recognition were meaningful, but the true reward lay in the journey itself, in the music that allowed him to express himself fully and fearlessly. And so, the boy's story continued, a story of triumph over doubt, of passion overcoming fear, and of a quiet student who found his voice through the piano. His journey was far from over, but he had discovered that with dedication, courage, and love for what he did, he could overcome any obstacle and inspire those around him. The music played on, carrying him forward, and in every note, the world could hear not just skill, but heart, resilience, and the beauty of a dream realized.